Good evening, parents and carers and other community members that are watching this evening. I hope you're all well. And for those who I haven't seen, I hope you had a wonderful summer break and welcome back to our Forest Focus webinar series for the Michaelmas term 2024. So I'm really excited to invite back some key members of our pastoral team here at Forest. And before I introduce those key staff members, I just want to remind you our next webinar will be on Wednesday, the 2nd of October, and that's going to be on why it's important to choose maybe an apprenticeship when you're planning your next steps. And please ensure that this is not just for sixth form pupils or sixth form parents and carers. This really is for anyone in the parent carer community and pupils, because we're really working on that spiral curriculum when it comes to futures. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Amanda Gale, who is our Place to Be project manager at Forest. As I've said before, she's a key member of our safeguarding and pastoral team. We work closely with her every day, and we are so grateful to have her, and so are the pupils. Also, we'll be joined with us Mrs. Melanie Wright. She is our head of learning support, and I know parents and carers and pupils work closely with her. Again, she's a key member of the safeguarding and pastoral team, and the focus for this evening's webinar is the impact of the pandemic on the social and emotional well-being of our young people. I'm really hoping we won't have any technical difficulties this evening, but if we do encounter any, please do bear with us, and we'll be sure to sort it out as quick as possible. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Melanie Wright, our Director of Learning Support.
Hello and good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us tonight. We wanted to use this focus to talk about the impact of the pandemic on social and emotional well-being of young people, and particularly because I think we've all seen lots of changes since the pandemic, and especially with our children coming back into school. So I wanted to discuss some of those things with you tonight and to think about strategies that you can do at home to really support the children, especially some of those that are struggling post-pandemic in terms of their learning and their emotional and social well-being. So the Education Endowment Fund did a report on the impact of COVID-19 on learning in May 2022. And the EEF are a charity that are set up to support education across the country. And some of their key findings were really interesting. Perhaps not surprisingly, they discovered that COVID-19 related disruptions had negatively impacted the attainment of pupils, and especially I think around reading and literacy. There was certainly a decline in reading ages and reading scores, top of primary school moving into secondary school. Teachers also reported concerns about the effect on pupil well-being, and the pandemic has negatively affected children's mental health. And we've seen quite a few of those things happening at Forest as in many other schools, and how that has really impacted on some of our children. The report stated that due to the partial closures, pupils in Year 7 and 8 missed important opportunities in Key Stage 2 to become secondary ready. And I think that's really significant for the children that were in primary school at the time of the pandemic and missed those kind of transition years. And sometimes we've noticed that children that have come to us following the pandemic in 7 and 8 really missed the structure of the school day and how that looked and how that worked for them. Attendance, at no point since the start of the pandemic has school attendance been returned to the average attendance report, census in 2019. So in 2019, attendance was at 95%. And following the pandemic, we haven't ever got back up to that rate of attendance. Socially, pupils were struggling with social aspects, and just some of that is like personal touching, interacting with large groups, coming in and dealing with school life. Pupils generally, had two different experiences of the pandemic. Either they really enjoyed online learning, or they enjoyed not having those early morning starts. They enjoyed not having to navigate the social aspects of school. They enjoyed the calmness of the day. And you might have seen that in the children that you were with at home during that time. But for others, they really struggled with not being in school and seeing friends, and they struggled with not having that social interaction and having the business of the school. So there really wasn't a one size fits all, and every child has dealt with the pandemic individually in their own way. The return to school, so today in the classroom, there's been a rise in the number of pupils who really struggle with their focus and concentration. And what I've seen, especially as head of learning support at Forest, is a lot of parents and young people saying they're struggling to focus in school. They're really struggling to focus in lessons. They zone out. They don't know whether they're listening to what's going on. They just really don't feel that they're part of the classroom at times. They've also struggled with the social interactions around the school, and they struggled with, the business of the day and getting from one side of the school to the other. They've really struggled with the learning endurance, and what I will come back to in a minute about the academic stamina, the idea of doing 6 periods of sitting and engaging and being part of their learning. And they need instant gratification. I think in the pandemic, a lot of children moved to video games and online gaming and computers and phones, and they all provide instant gratification to children. And then you come into a classroom and they have to wait for an answer or wait for a response. And children just are not good at doing that anymore. They want their questions answered straight away. They want things to happen straight away. They want it to be interactive. And some have struggled to come to school at all. And we talk about EBSA, which is emotional based school avoidance. And I think since the pandemic, we've really seen a rise in that, not just at Forest, but everywhere, where children have struggled to come in because they just find it too overwhelming. So we know that as a learner, it's great to have good concentration. And as an adult, it's great to have good concentration as well. And we know that this good concentration means that they're going to be better learners. They're going to be better in tackling the school day. They're going to be better at actually being socially able to deal with what's facing them. And so what we want to try and do is build some good concentration habits, and to think about what you can do at home, what we can do at school in partnership to help our young people have better focus and concentration in school. So one of the things is to try and rebuild that academic stamina, that need to sit for a period of time, to face challenge, to expect delayed gratification as opposed to instant gratification. And so when they're at home and they have their homework time, some of the things you can do is make sure that everything that is distracting is out of sight. Remove the phones, turn off the Wi-Fi, put them in a separate room, put them somewhere where you can see them or check in on them. All of those kind of things are really important. We also know that diet is really important, and having vegetables, omega-3, which if you don't know is a really good oil for children, can be found in fishes and fruits and veg, but again helps concentration. So think about what are your children eating through the school day. They come to school and they might have a cookie at break time or something like that. Just think about those sugar highs and lows. We all know if we eat chocolate or anything like that gives us a sugar rush, we sometimes are deflated afterwards. If they come in from school, what snack are they having? Are they having a sugar rush and then they will flop when they come to do their work, or are they having something a little bit more sustained before their dinner? A proper routine is really important. And I think one of the things that COVID really highlighted was the lack of routine for children and the lack of structure in their day. And so trying to have a routine is, lots of people, adults and young children, really benefit from routine. So think about what happens when they come in from school. Do they have a set routine? Maybe you're not at home because you're at work and you can't get in till a bit later, but maybe, you can check in with them or make sure that they know what that routine is. But having a structure to their evenings will really help them with their homework and their learning environment generally. Children need to have some ownership as well. I think very much children want everything to be fixed by those around them. Teachers, I'm not learning, or parents, I'm not doing my homework. Actually, it's about teaching them resilience and teaching them responsibility. So let them have a voice in it. Sit down with them and say, right, we need to have a routine in the evening. What we're going to make that look like? write it down, put it on the fridge door, put it on the oven door, stick it up so everybody knows. And make it really clear that it's their voice in that, but also have that conversation about, well, what are you going to do if you don't actually follow through on this? What happens if I come home and you still haven't done your homework, or it's not finished? What are the consequences for that? So holding them to account is really important. A really good thing for their studying is to use timers, so they've got something in front of them to see how long they should be spending. So think about things that actually keep them focused in terms of the time span they're spending on their work. Sleep, really important, and we all know the benefits of good sleep. And children find it difficult to sleep, and they might be asleep but might really be on their phone. So, think about that too. Make sure they have a good bedtime routine, that they know what they're doing, that they're switching the phones off, whatever it is, so they get some really good downtime with that. When they're studying, just think about their environment as well. We've talked about perhaps moving them into a place where you can see them, or a room where they can study, as opposed to perhaps their bedroom, or where they're going to be distracted easily. Think about being in a comfortable chair, thinking about being somewhere where it's really organized and everything is set out for them. Think about having folders at home for their subjects, so they can put their work into their their notes into their folders when they get home. Making their environment and their space organized will really help with their organizational skills. Think about packing the bag before they come to school the next day, checking with them, maybe getting them to look at their team's assignments and checking what they need to do. Just checking in with them can be really, really helpful. We talked about heavy meals in the evening. So again, be nutritious and think about the food that you're feeding them. There is a limit to a child's attention span. There's a limit to everybody's attention span. But the homework that is set should be done in the time that it is set for. And it's important that they learn time. A lot of children don't know what time feels like, so they don't know the difference for 5 minutes and an hour. And a really good little way of checking that out is asking them to sit in a room. Take away all the clocks, all the phones or whatever, and ask them to sit there for 1 minute and then go into another room and see if they can feel what a minute is like. And that's really important when they come to exams and lessons, because lessons work on a timetable. They are 50 minutes, or if it's a double, it's 100 minutes. Exams work on a time. They need to feel what it feels like to sit for a certain period of time. And if you have a child who's active, who gets up and about, wants to do loads of things all the time, we have to teach them and train them that actually they're going to have to eventually sit in exam hall for 2 hours without getting up and moving around. So anything you can do to try and teach them the value of time and what that feels like in their homework sessions with you is really important. So again, use the time as use something to show that this is what they should be spending on a piece of work. And try and avoid the external disturbances. We all live in busy houses and busy homes, but something going on somewhere else can disturb one of your children from concentrating. So, perhaps ear defenders, you can get really nice ones that just go in the ear now and not over the ear, that look too bad. But at home, just something to try and keep their focus and help by minimizing the external disturbances around them. So I hope that some of those things are some helpful tips. And I think it is about just building back those focus and concentration strategies for them. I think in class, we do notice that they do seem distracted. And it is, again, about understanding that academic stamina, to understand that you need to sit and learn. And I think it is something that was reduced during the pandemic because of the time they spent at home doing other things and not having that routine. So anything where you can help them do that at home and we can help them do that at school should be really, really beneficial to them. So I'm going to pass it over now to Amanda, who's going to talk a little bit about the emotional side of children who are feeling anxious and how they feel about coming back to school post-pandemic. So Amanda, over to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Wright. Yes, I'm Amanda. I'm from the Place to Be here at Forest. And one of the biggest things we've noticed since the lockdown about the children that we work with is the significant increase in anxiety. And you may have seen a recent Guardian article that described how NHS referrals for anxiety in children have more than doubled since lockdown, with factors cited including intensifying academic pressures, especially related to exams, the powerful influence of social media, and growing pressures around physical appearance. So more than 4 years later, many children remain uncertain about the world around them. And it's possible that the pandemic and the lockdown has amplified these pressures by disrupting routines and increasing feelings of isolation. And it's true, as Mrs. Wright says, that some children have found it really difficult getting back into the swing of the school routine. So what is anxiety? We know it's a very normal and healthy emotion that everyone experiences, sometimes daily, and it can be useful in giving us a burst of energy when we need it. If we're doing a performance or something, it can be really helpful. It's an emotional response to a real or perceived threat, and it's important to remember that the sensation is the same whether the threat is real or imagined. And in terms of physical feelings, we're thinking of clammy hands, you can't think straight, feelings of dread, maybe not sleeping, tiredness, mood swings, lack of concentration, as Mrs. Wright described, irritability, aches, pains, sweating, shaking, chest pain, palpitations. There are so many symptoms. You might feel like you're going mad, or you're about to do something inappropriate. And it's really important to remember that anxiety is not the person's fault. It's not necessarily something they can just stop doing, be talked out of, or ignore. And in terms of a definition for anxiety, Mind, a mental health charity, says anxiety is what we feel when we are worried, tense, or afraid, particularly about things that are about to happen or which we think could happen in the future. Anxiety is a natural human response when we perceive that we are under threat. It can be experienced through our thoughts, feelings, and physical sensations. So in terms of how Place to Be would support your child or your young person with strategies to manage anxiety. So it's a common misconception that there is nothing that can be done about anxiety. And this is something we myth bust with the children. Because sometimes they feel that it just has to be suffered, and it doesn't. And actually there are things you can do to support yourself, to reground and review what the actual level of risk is in the present moment. And many of these activities can be done in 5 minutes if you practice. So some of these are self-explanatory, and a couple I will come back to. So the hot cross bun I shall come back to. But we know that daily exercise is really, really helpful. Breathing, managing your breath can help to regulate your emotions. Talking to someone, getting things off your chest. Mindfulness, I will come back to. Healthy sleeping and eating, really important, and making sure you have time for yourself. And it might be that not all of these strategies work, or that you'll need to be alert when you're perhaps trying to do the breathing exercises or the mindfulness. That might override your initial attempt to calm your anxious feelings. But if the first thing doesn't work, what would encourage the children is try it again, or try something different. And if we consider developing resistance to anxiety as like developing a new skill, you wouldn't be expected to be good at it the first time you try it. So like any new skill, it needs to be practiced. New neural pathways need to be developed. You need to unlearn some of your behaviours, and thinking about doing it isn't the same as actually doing it. Regulating the nervous system can be a balm for anxiety, and it is something we can do for ourselves. And it helps to pay attention to what makes us feel better and what doesn't make us feel better, so that we have a selection of strategies to hand. So understanding ourselves can make our anxiety feel more manageable. And we sometimes use this hot cross bun model to develop self-awareness of how our thoughts, emotions, physical state, and behaviour all influence each other. So this is a cognitive behaviour therapy, or CBT model, developed by Greenberger and Podesky in 1995. And what we would do is we would sit with the child and get them to have a look at this hot cross bun model, to look at each segment and explain how each area influences another, and that they will be individual to us, stemming from the way in which we perceive the world around us. So we might look at this and say, think of a situation that makes you anxious, like coming into school or an impending exam. And then we'd look at each quartile and really think about what's going on for us in that moment. So what are we feeling? And it could be like, I can't do this. I don't want to go into school. So what behaviours are you exhibiting? I will stay in bed and I won't get up. I won't turn my alarm off. And the thoughts could be anything along the lines of what happens if, what if I can't? And then the physiological responses of what's happening in our body. How do we feel? And those are the the sweaty palms or the red cheeks or whatever it is that's making us feel anxious. And we all behave individually when we're anxious. So I might busy myself with work or cleaning to distract myself. Other people might become forgetful or drop things or have accidents. And we'll be thinking to the child, what is it that you do? And get them to fill out each section. And then what we're looking for are patterns that emerge and the places where we can try and disrupt that cycle. Because if we disrupt the behaviours, that might change the thoughts, which will impact the feelings. And we might start to learn to feel a little bit better. So again, this is something that takes practice. It takes time. It's something that over the weeks, the children may come back and say, yes, I noticed this about myself. And when I change my routine or when I do something different, this is what happens. And what we're trying to do is get them to be in control of what they're thinking, what they're feeling and their behaviours. And this can help manage the anxiety. And mindfulness is something that you may well have heard of. And I just wanted to talk through the sort of mindfulness exercise that we might do with a young person when they're feeling anxious. So we might start by sitting with them and saying, "Well, give me a scale of 1 to 10. What is your level of anxiety?" And they will score that. How is your heart rate, your muscle tension? What's your mood like? And then we'd invite them to put both feet on the floor. Notice the weight of your feet on the floor. Really push and feel your feet into the floor. Relax your feet. Sit in the chair. Feel yourself sitting in the chair. Notice the backs of your legs on the seat. Notice your breathing. Feel the rise and fall of your stomach as you allow the chair to hold you. Notice your shoulders falling as you allow yourself to breathe. Now look around you. What is on the walls? Is there something you can see? And what we're doing here is trying to get them to really be in the moment. And that can really help in regulating and saying to yourself internally, in this moment, right now, I'm okay and I'm safe. And then once you've completed an exercise like that, and it would obviously take a lot longer, I've just raced through some steps there, they might find that their anxiety has come down. And if that is helpful to them, that's something that they can do by themselves to practice. And it's a tool that can help to alleviate the symptoms of anxiety. So anxiety is considered problematic if the symptoms cause significant distress and impact on daily functioning. So when everyday anxiety does become problematic, it might be considered an anxiety disorder. So if you or someone you know is experiencing anxiety to a level that disrupts normal functioning, really would be wise to go to the GP and get some help. In terms of supporting yourself as well as your children and the young people in your lives, it's really important to normalise feelings of anxiety. We all have them. And one of the biggest things parents can do is model your own, looking after your own mental health and showing your children that you do prioritise your own regulation, being mindful that anxiety can be catching. And children pick up on their parents' anxiety. So just be really mindful of that and prioritising your own access to exercise, sleep and healthy eating will show your children that, yes, it is important. And what children really need is for adults around them to be able to regulate them physically, to help them regulate physically and emotionally. And that could be done by listening, by talking, by empathising, by comforting. And in terms of listening, it's really important to listen and maybe not offer advice, just really listen to what your child is saying so that they feel really, really heard. And adults need to be around other grounded adults to be regulated. So do look at your own support network, which is really, really important. And I don't know if you've heard of the Every Mind Matters website from the NHS, but it's really, really useful. It's got some self-help CBT style techniques, which can support with reframing unhelpful thoughts and tackling worries. So that's just a brief outline of how we might work with the children through Place to Be to help with their anxiety. If you have any other questions, please do get in touch with me via school. And I wish you all a very lovely evening. Thank you for joining us.